You're listening to the Growth Stories podcast, the show where we interview business owners, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders to hear their stories about how they've grown and scaled their businesses to amazing heights. I'm your host, Ben Landers, and in today's episode, I'm interviewing Bill Reedy. Bill is the CEO of Reedy Capital, the former CEO of Reedy Industries, and the business that Bill and his team built, starting with a family-owned business, a small family-owned business, is truly amazing. As Bill and I go back in time through his journey, through his growth story, you'll hear some of the things that he learned while going to a top business school and how you can use formal education to augment the practical MBA that you get working in your business. You'll hear the importance of being a lifelong learner, how people like Bill never stop seeking and reaching out to people who have already accomplished what Bill's trying to achieve. You'll also learn how frameworks like the 80-20 can be used to bring focus and improve not just your business, but also your life. Bill is an awesome guy, one of the smartest people that I know, so I think you're really going to enjoy this. Bill, great to see you. It's been a long time. Welcome to Growth Stories.
Good to be here, Ben. Nice to see you.
Now, you probably don't realize this. You couldn't possibly realize this, but you are something of a legend within the Blue Corona, world. It was probably 2014 or 2015. You came to our Maryland office and you gave a presentation to our employees and just told the Reedy Industries story, your growth story. And the team was, you did a fantastic job. Great presenter. The whole team was inspired. But the best thing was that, you wove all these little anecdotes, whether again, you did this intentionally or not, you wove all these little anecdotes into your story. And some of those have become things that have worked into the sort of the vernacular at Blue Corona, these little statements where someone's like, man, that's really cool. Where did you get that from? And then someone will say, oh, remember that guy that came and presented to us all those years ago. So you've obviously come a long way, from then, but you had a huge impact on our company and, as a customer back then and just in your words. So I'm really excited to have you on. And why don't we just start by maybe give people who aren't familiar with you and your company or companies just a brief overview.
Sure. No, well, first of all, thanks for saying that. And it's great to see you again. It's hard to imagine it was that many years ago because it seems like a few days ago, but it's great to see you. My name is Bill Reedy. I'm the CEO of Reedy Capital. But for purpose of this discussion, I'm the former CEO of Reedy Industries, which was a family business holding company where within that, under that umbrella, we established really three sort of discrete, distinctive business. One was a parts distribution business called Partstown. Another was a mechanical contracting business, mechanical services business, which held the name Reedy Industries, but operated under many different DBAs. And then finally, a national retail HVAC company called Metrotech, which is now called Degree One. So that's my background. And that's where I spent 30 years of my life working in those businesses and at a very operational level.
Now, remind me, you went to work for the family business and then you went back to Northwestern for business school. Was that the order of operations or did you go directly to business school and then go work?
I went to Northwestern's Kellogg much later. I started in 1987 and went to Kellogg at 2004. And one of the reasons is when you're in a family business, there's lots of good learning, there's lots of good education, but it's limited. It's you learn it, you get an MBA by family, or I always called it an MBA by my father, which was wonderful. And there's a lot to learn there. But I realized if I really wanted to grow the business, I had high aspirations for what I thought the business could be. And I ran in against my own guardrails, against the old learning that I learned from my dad. So wanting to expand that, I went and got my MBA, and that really broadened the education, broadened my ambition, broadened what I thought was potential, not just in terms of where I could go, but also it gave me some of the tools I needed in which to do it. Probably, I like to joke, one of the best things I got from Kellogg was my partner, Steve, who came in to run Partstown, who's just an extraordinary leader and has taken that to unbelievable heights.
Yeah, the Partstown story is incredible, and I want to get into that, and maybe I've met Steve. He's awesome. And I think you gave me a tour of Partstown, and I remember one of the things I really remember was as you guys were showing me around. First of all, Steve was sharing an office with like 3 or 4 people, and he said to me, Ben, don't ever take on more office space. If you take on office space in advance and you don't block it off, you watch how your employees will sort of grow. Like all of a sudden, someone will have their own office, their own little fiefdom. And so he said, don't expand until you're just busting at the seams. And he walked into his office. There was like 2 or 3 people in there. I was like, when someone's actions match their words, that's a key thing. But I also remember you guys were walking around the office, and there was like this bin with thank you and appreciation cards. And I think the concept was, if there was ever like a customer situation where you just wanted to shoot out like a little note, or an employee, that kind of give appreciation to employees. And I remember coming back to our business and saying, it's like when we were small, I think we had maybe 30 or 40 employees when I first met you and we were doing this kind of thing. Maybe we were a little bit bigger. I just remember kind of our team, like if I ever suggested doing something so like deliberate like that, some people on our team like, oh, come on, like, you're not going to codify, something like that. I'm like, well, these guys are running a world-class company and this is what they're doing. So are we smarter than they are? I don't think so. Like, let's just copy, sort of thing. So, but go back for a second. I guess unlike you, I sort of got my MBA working and building the business. I'm sure a lot of people listening are sort of doing that too. And I remember wanting to go to business school or, something like OPM at Harvard, that owner president's sort of program, just to get what you're talking about. What were some of the either sort of tools or some of the things that you learned just high level at Northwestern that then you brought back, that someone then hearing could kind of at least learn a little bit more about if they don't go back to business school?
Yeah, well, look, it's broader than that, is just the idea that one needs to always be learning. And so I've always looked for, whether it's an institution with Kellogg or people, who's doing that which I want to do, or who's achieved that which I want to achieve. So to me, the juice of life is learning and trying something that you haven't done in a while, and taking, whether it's a business or something what might do on a personal endeavor, like, triathlons or running or skiing or what have you, is doing that which you haven't done before. That to me is very exciting. So the secret trick to that is finding someone who's done it and get a shortcut to that. Because one is you might find it on your own, but there's a lot of toil, and it triples or quadruples the time, as opposed to someone who gives you the cliff notes and says, hey, just follow these steps and you'll get there. So broadly speaking, with Kellogg, the things that really, first and foremost, I joke when I say it, but it's true. I would say broadly, it's networking and people I came into contact with, which were doing neat things in their business. Very specifically, it was partnering with someone who's become a dear friend of mine, Steve, who's led an extraordinary business. So I would say that holds the top spot. The other people I came into contact with play out in life, because it's a group of whatever it is, 60 or 70 people that are out in the world who are aspirational and hardworking and doing interesting things. And you're amazed at how often you might bump into them along the road. And it broadens your world from, I was in an HVAC or parts distribution business, but meeting people in other walks of life where you can take best practices that are happening somewhere else and apply them to our business, which I think is what led me to you, Ben, in the first place. Is there was a lot of SEO and a lot of PPC and a lot of things going on in other industries, but the time we met you, it was not going on in the HVAC business in any sort of material way.
Particularly commercial. I mean, on the commercial side, I think it's still underutilized. But
that's right. So we picked that up from somewhere else, from a relationship we had. It was working really well in other industries, of course, and applied it to our business. So I think those were some of the broad things that we learned.
What about Bill? One of the things I noticed about you, and I've noticed about a number of leaders, and a lot of them have gone to business schools. Did Northwestern utilize sort of the case method, where you would read a case and then sort of unpack it as a class, I guess?
They did. And one of the really appealing things about Kellogg, at least when I went as a business leader, as a CEO, not as someone I didn't go to the full-time program. I went to what's called the executive program. And one of the very appealing things about that is I already knew what I wanted to do. I wasn't looking to get another job somewhere. And so some of the case studies or examples I could do on my own business. So they became real life examples where it wasn't this abstract idea of what TiVo's doing, although we did case studies on TiVo at the time. But there were things where if I asked the professor, can I apply this to our own business and write a case study, they would allow it. And then I'd have these teams, these groups, which is a big part of Kellogg's educational experience, teams and groups that would work together on the idea and really advance the cause, and something I could put to work the next day.
I know, what I see and saw in you and some of these other folks is sort of more leading with questions as opposed to being directorial. I know when I was building our business, there's this, we bootstrapped the business, I didn't have a lot of money, so I put in what I had or what I could afford to lose. And then, I adopted accidentally, I'm sort of action oriented and, ideas coming really quickly. And so whenever we would have a challenge, I'm in the conference room up at the whiteboard, I'm sort of starting to elicit ideas from the team, but inevitably it would turn into like, well, why don't we do this? And why don't we do this? Where now I'm sort of directing and they're all sitting there going, sure, whatever he wants to do, we're going to end up doing. And I remember when we got to, 20 or 30, 40 employees, I don't remember who pointed it out, but, sort of this, them pointing out that like, if you're always putting the cape on, and like running in like Superman, you're not lifting up your team, you're not building your team. A bunch of them are going to leave. Like you have to learn how to lead through them. And so I say that related back to Northwestern and Kellogg, and that I feel like when you're doing the cases, it's a lot about like the questions that are coming out of it, the question that the teacher is asking of the class, and then people are sort of debating. At least when I've watched YouTube videos on it, that's what it seems like. I mean, did you pick up some of that? Like
you do, yeah. You do, and you hit on a key point, Ben. It's knowing all the answers is uninteresting because you become your own limiter to your own business because you're one person with a point of view and a experience set or a skill set. So what's more interesting is tapping into the group dynamic because everyone comes from a different place. The diversity of background and diversity of experience, if you can tap into that and get their opinions, you become more of a coach or facilitator. And I like your example of being on the whiteboard. If you can open up to the ideas of everyone of how, my always belief is create an aspiration of here's where we want to go. Here's where I think our business has the capacity to go. And then stretching it a little bit further so that it's exciting and exhilarating, a little scary. And then you tap into you kind of crowdsource within your own team. How do we get there from here? And at the whiteboard, you try to distill it down. And what I always tried to do is we had this sort of unique practice that I came up with out of, we did a lot of 80-20 work, which was really compelling and really accelerated our business. But we had to distill down our plan into, I called it a 3x3. And it was, you could have an overarching goal that you had to state in 3 words. And then you only got 3 goals in which each had to be written in 3 words. So 12 words was our annual plan that you could come up with as much as you wanted on that whiteboard. But you had to be able to distill it down into action-oriented, when you got their sort of plans, and you had 12 words to do it. And everyone had to buy into it. So, you might have 25 things on the board, but you get 12 words ultimately before you head out and figure out what you're going to do in the next 12 months. So that really, it weeded out a lot of buzzwords. It weeded out a lot of words that sound great but mean nothing. And there was no place to hide in that. And the idea was if we looked at these 12 words and achieved these 12 months from now, would we feel good about what we did? Would we have moved and advanced the ball on our journey to wherever we thought we were going in a material way? And if the answer is yes, we do, and I don't know how we're going to get there, then you're probably on the right track.
Would you say sort of, I love that as someone who's sort of more of a rapid idea guy and probably struggles with focus, I love the idea of sort of distilling it down. I remember listening to Seth Godin, he's like a famous marketing speaker, is just brilliant. And Seth made this comment, the most remarkable thing is like he packs so much meaning in a 1 paragraph blog post. Like it would take me 5 pages to to try to distill that. And I would have to borrow most of the ideas from him. And I remember him saying I would make them even shorter if I had more time. It takes so much time to really like get it down to the essence of what you're trying to say or do. And so I really admire that. Is that kind of, I guess, does that lead into sort of maybe a mistake that you see sort of broadly speaking in small, medium-sized businesses, sort of this, we're going to accomplish everything and sort of your eyes being larger than your mouth, you know, type of thing, and the importance of focus? I guess talk about that as it relates to the companies that you've, you know, sort of been involved with as a director or, you know, just advisor type thing.
Yeah. Look, I think it does. I can only speak for the business I'm involved with, but, and I can only speak because it makes sense to me. I'm a simple guy that I need to kind of keep winnowing away until you get to the essence of what the business is or what the aspiration is. If there are too many words, I feel dizzy and confused and can't quite get my head around it. But if I can get it down to a couple of tangible words or a couple of key concepts, it makes sense to me. And then it becomes useful. So, you know, for example, you know, the goals that most people have, or the mission statement and vision statement and values that most people have, they then sit on a shelf and don't impact the business in any material way. And we kept working on that as a company. We too had a, you know, 5-sentence vision or mission, and I got it down ultimately over time with the help of the team to the words were to improve. That's our mission. And everyone understood that. Everyone got what that meant. Everyone could apply that in daily life into whatever they're doing, whether you're an accounts receivable clerk or a technician or working in the warehouse. Really, people could understand it. You could ask anyone at any time what our mission statement is, and they would say it's to improve. And then you would know how that applies to your everyday life, whether the life is under our rooftop or in our truck or at home with your family. We really wanted these visions and missions to apply to the whole person, not just to the 7 to 10 hours we get them during the day, but to the 24 hours that they have in their life.
How, you know, one of the challenges, or one of the things that I found and find most challenging, is sort of this, you know, every business gets these little inflection points or bottlenecks or pinch points where, you know, on the one hand, like Blue Corona grew very rapidly, and we'd get to these points where all of a sudden it was like chaos. And whatever we were doing, there was the sense that some of it we need to keep doing and some of it we need to change. What served us well to get here is not serving us, is not going to serve us to get to the next step. But I never really I never had a great framework for figuring out what needs to stay and what needs to go. And I'm not even sure to this day how well, you know, I mean, I must have weeded the garden correctly to some degree, or we wouldn't be talking. But I guess talk about either through maybe Partstown, the Partstown story, because that business has really, you know, taken off and grown, or some of the other businesses sort of in the portfolio. It's like when the businesses hit these points, what were some of the, I don't know, I guess some of the symptoms of like, we're at one of those points, like we're outgrowing a system, or we need new positions created because people are doing too many different things and not doing them well. And how did you, Steve, you and the leaders of these companies, how did you think about it? How did you kind of process? I mean, was it that you took a course in organizational design in business school, or is it more of this is sort of how we just figured it out?
Yeah, well, I will say most of the ways we broke through things had little to do with my MBA formal, and then I would say my informal MBA. It's finding the individuals in the world who have gotten over those humps. So the person running the $1 billion business who could tell us how to get there, as opposed to the organizational structure of a textbook class. So that to me is really important. But I would say a lot of it, you know, is you and I, Ben, like, you know, when to replace oneself is always an interesting question. And I've done that, and our leaders have done that every step of the way. You know, I was extraordinarily operational. I ran the company for many, many years and realized I was that which was blocking our future growth. So I stepped up to become a CEO, broke the business down into 3 discrete businesses, hired their own leadership teams, management presidents and CFOs and so on, at a time where, as my dad used to say, you know, it was a shirt 2 or 3 sizes too big that we'd grow into. It was a leap of faith and a lot of overhead, but that allowed us to have 3 really talented people focusing on their unique issues and customer sets and skill sets to make the business to the next level. And then over time, they would replace themselves and sort of move up the chain in the business. And for us, ultimately, it led to where I was the CEO with three leadership teams and management groups running their discrete businesses, growing at different rates, realizing that we had a huge opportunity to grow, and the opportunity outstripped a family's capital structure and risk-taking ability. We realized this was time to find a private equity sponsor to come in and partner with us, and that if we ate our own cooking and we wanted to continue to grow, we needed an external person where we would just keep migrating. I would keep migrating to a different role and backfilling with more talented people at that particular level. I recognize my place in the universe. I'm very good at running businesses of a certain size. If it's meant to get to the next level, there are other people that are better at it than I am who can take it to the next level. And Steve was a great example of that. And the private equity firms are great examples of giving us the organizational, the capital, the ambition to take it even to greater heights, and parting with the unique and 100% ownership as a family to bring in other partners was a real milestone for us, and took a lot of soul searching, but got us to a place where now these businesses collectively, which were, when I took over, probably in the tens of millions, and we got it to the hundreds of millions, and now approaching 2 billion and growing quickly collectively. So if you're honest to yourself and to your team about growth is important, sometimes you got to get out of the way and bring in partners to honor those commitments to the team, where they are getting opportunities both in terms of equity and in terms of career advancements and so on. And it's humbling and important to do. So
maybe talk about, I wouldn't say this is a challenge for us, but it's something that we've gone through over the years. And I know other businesses have gone through it as well, which is, like, we were working with a residential HVAC company, and they grew from, I think they were like maybe 6 or 7 million. They got to 25 million, 3 partners, 3 owners, not family, but, good friends. And our point of contact, who was kind of the president or COO, was sort of saying, we've been trying to grow at 30% year over year and working our butts off. And, it's like, why keep doing it? We're making a great living. We have a great brand, and we're sort of questioning like the marketing plan to keep growing 30%. And of course, I'm sitting there like, as they're our customer, I'm like, no, you want to keep growing. Growth is great. Like, you want to keep going. And, why would you if you're not growing, you're dying. But, it would get us sort of thinking about and talking about, sort of this relentless pursuit of growth versus sort of just having this lifestyle business. I guess talk about what growth, why growth is so important to you, the things that you think it opens up or unlocks, and sort of why you pursue it versus why didn't you just stop, when you got Partstown and grew that to where it did, and what kept you going?
Oh, it's a great question. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know a lot of people who run businesses that make great livings and have lives that are balanced in a way that makes sense to them. It's just not who I am. And I think like attracts like. I was in a business where in my personal life and my professional life, as we started to allude to earlier, would just like to improve. How do you make things a little bit better? How do you grow a little faster? I think for the fun of it, for the exhilaration of it, but also it attracts a type of person that not only is drawn to that, but requires that. So if you want to attract and retain the best people, you need to keep growing as a way to pay more, give more opportunities, whether it's career-wise, give equity opportunities, give them a chance to do their own thing within your world, within our collective world, where together these high talent, best in class athletes can grow the business and have opportunities. Otherwise, they'll go somewhere else, and rightfully so. So we had this pressure that we put on ourselves that to continue to grow, to continue to create opportunities, because we made commitments to people that we'd continue to do that, and we wanted them to advance their careers under our umbrella as opposed to someone else.
I love hearing you, you mentioned the word athlete, as you were sort of talking about that. We used to think, we always talk about business as a game or a sport, and people as you have these business athletes. And I seem to be catching more flack about this, maybe less these days, but I used to catch a lot of flack about sort of my personal decision to sort of, I blend together life. I don't, like, I'll be at my daughter's soccer game and chatting up some mom on the sideline who turns out to be an executive for a big company. And it's like, oh, what do you do there? And what are the challenges you face? And how did you do that? And like, how did you think of that? And of course it's like, am I working? I mean, not to me, I'm not working. I'm just having a great, conversation. I have no interest in professional, football. And so I gravitate towards the people that want to talk about, stuff that's interesting to me, which tends to be business and personal growth and that kind of thing. And it sounds like, again, when you said having a company that's growing to attract, you do tend to attract those types of people. And I guess, every now and then I'll put up a post on LinkedIn and about sort of this work life, integration. And inevitably someone always will put up a comment like, that's a toxic way to think about things. And I always think to myself, I'm not saying you should be like this. I'm not at all. I'm only sharing this thing that I think, is really cool that happened in my life for other people that, either like this or think like this, or, it's just like super rewarding and it's just fun. But I've never understood the whole, like, again, if you don't find your job fun and you just do it to pay the mortgage, like that's totally cool. We probably won't hang out very much because that's a depressing concept for me. But there's no judgment. That's your thing. Like, that's cool. You do you.
That's right. You do you. It's important to find out who you are and what motivates you. And as the leader, you better be authentic to yourself and form the business in that manner. And again, which is not to make a value judgment on anyone who does it a different way. But to me, that's why growth is important. And I really, I think you take on, when you're running a company, a really important responsibility. And that is that of leading people and taking care of people and making sure you create opportunities for them and have an organization that is, at its base level stable, that will survive and continue to grow and expand, but also that in that expansion, in that growth, you can create opportunities for people, because the type of people we want to attract sign on to that. And to not be able to deliver that is a mistake, and a mistake to our own peril.
You said something that really struck me, which is you said, I'm good at leading businesses up to a certain size. And then beyond that, you have to bring someone in to do it. But the interesting thing there is that what you are doing today is sort of the, and again, this is my interpretation, but it's sort of like the architecture at a much bigger level. So it's almost like, if you thought of it as like a continuum of like getting a business to X, 20, 30, 40 million, whatever it is. And then there's this middle stretch where it's like running the operations of a $200 million company. But then there's being the architect of sort of the whole enterprise. It seems like you're exceptionally good at the latter, and by your own statement, getting businesses off the ground to a certain size. Is that because there are sort of talents that you have that work really well getting it off the ground, and really well sort of vision building the enormous thing, but you don't like the stuff in the middle? And is this just my wacky interpretation of it?
Oh, it's a great interpretation. Look, I know I'm not good, and I admire the heck out of people who take something from idea to something. There are people who are really, really good at having an idea and spinning something out of whole cloth, where they actually create a business that produces revenue. That's not me. I'm not that person. So when it gets to a certain size, there become organizational issues and SKU issues and capital requirements. It just makes sense to me. I get that, and I can roll up my sleeves on the operational side of that, and I'm pretty good at it. I know how to take it from X to Y. Beyond that, there's a whole nother level of needs that it requires. And whereas I'm learning that by being on the director level and strategic level, I'm learning that because I'm on a group. I'm surrounded by people who have done that for a living for 30 years. So much as I've run businesses in the $15 to $150 million range, there are people that have run businesses in the $1 billion to $2 billion range that just get what the capital issues are and the organizational issues and the legal issues and all sorts of other things. So whereas I'm learning that, and it's interesting, if I were to run a business, I know where my sweet spot is and I would do that, but I'm much enjoying, I like this stage of life where I've done this for a certain time, and now I'm on to the next thing where there's all sorts of learning, and when you're drinking through the fire hose and learning different things, and then seeing it play out in these wonderful organizations that I'm privileged to be a part of.
One of my favorite podcasts, not even really a podcast, I can't remember their name. I want to say it's Enceladus Capital. They basically have recorded every Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting from 1980 something to now. And as you probably know, it's all Q&A with Warren and Charlie, and now these days the newer Greg Abel and those guys. And I used to remember listening to it and them saying, hey, look, if we had $1 million and had to make a return on it, that's easy. It'd be really easy. But it's hard to deploy. It's hard to keep that success going with $1 billion in cash or whatever it was. And for the longest time, I was like, I don't know, I can't even understand it. And then one day Charlie went through sort of this sort of practical example. It's like, if we had to try to like you're buying these smaller companies, buying stock in these smaller companies, and there's 2 million shares being exchanged a day. You know how long it would take us to deploy, $1 billion? And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, the practical, and I think of it, as a small business owner, there are certain things that, again, when it's just you and the team is small, you can call every customer, you can overturn everything and check everything. But then at a certain size, it just doesn't scale, won't work. That leads me to thinking about the 80-20, which I know is sort of bedrock, for you. How did you first get introduced to the 80-20 principle? And can you think of any, and maybe talk about how it's impacted you and growing your businesses, but also think about, are there any places where 80-20 doesn't make sense, either in business or in your personal life?
I'll start with the last question first. I haven't found it yet. I found it just to be this sort of immutable law of nature, that there's this natural imbalance where 20% of something gives you 80% of the value. And I like that you asked the question, because it applies as much personally as it does professionally to how we're living. So, for example, personally, who are the people? What are the things you like to do? We're all shoulder with obligations and things that we don't want to do. If you can distill it down to or at least you spend a disproportionate amount of times with the people that you care about and care about the most, the things you like to do, the foods you eat, and so on, you find that you accelerate your happiness in life, your joy in life. And so it does apply there. In business, we were pretty disciplined about it, which isn't to say we always did it, because like any discipline, sometimes you fall off the wagon a little bit, but generally we really worked it. And again, it made sense to me in that it distills things down to its most simplistic level. So the easiest way to think about it is in the context of customers. If one had 100 customers, it's safe to say that 20% of them, or 20, are providing 80% of the value, or 80% of the revenue, or 80% of the margin, 80% of something good that you want in your business. And if you can organize your business around those 20 customers, it's a bit counterintuitive, because a lot of people worry about and think about the margin of the other 80. And then they often say, if you organize your business around those 20, you're putting your eggs in one basket. The secret to all that, your eggs are already in one basket, and you just don't know it. You're building a more secure basket when you recognize that. You say, oh my goodness, our whole business is here. They're not only 80% of the margin, they're probably, when you think about it on an SG&A level, they're probably over 100% of your total profitability. So you can ill afford to lose any one of those. And if you build your organization, your services, your process around taking care of them and delighting them, two interesting things happen. Your retention goes up and you don't risk losing them. And two is just, there's always more revenue in them. And if you can build a business around 20 customers that are growing rapidly, it's an easier, more simple business to run. Which isn't to say you don't do business with the other 80, you just do them in a different way, in a way that appropriates and gives the appropriate SG&A for those particular customers. But it's very, very powerful, and it's, some of our companies more than others really applied that beautifully. And I would say it was game changing, particularly in the early stage of our career. It also really helps you understand what your business and where the goodness is coming from, because it makes you define what makes a 20, what makes a great customer. And you have to, soul search and think about that.
I've got a perfect story related to that, which is, and it involves you. One is, I remember you were in our conference room, and I have a tendency of embellishing stories, not on purpose. It's like the way I hear it in my mind versus what someone actually said. So if you didn't say it quite like this, then, that's the embellishment on my part. But I remember somehow we were talking about, how I was running the company and that kind of thing. And again, you were just offering sort of, outside counsel. And I think something that I had said led you to say, one of your challenges, Ben, or an issue is that you are spending too much time with, sort of the C and D customers and employees. And you're not spending enough time with, I don't know that you said folks like me, but it was sort of like your A clients and your A employees. And then again, what I heard, you may not have said this, but what I heard you saying was something like, you're not good enough to turn a D, client employee, into a B. Like, you're just not good enough. And instead, you ought to spend that time on your best customers because there's more revenue you're not even aware of. And what you may not be aware of is the way I met you in person the first time, I flew to Chicago. I flew to Chicago to meet with a bunch of our big customers. And I had a gap in my meetings before my flight. And so I said to Sean Coleman, I said, Sean, don't we have any other customers? It doesn't matter who they are, how long they've been with us. I just need a couple meetings to fill before the flight. And he was like, well, I just signed on this commercial kitchen repair company. And their office is sort of out the direction that you're going to get to Midway from wherever I was traveling. And he said, they're small and they're new. It's like a $2 or $3 million company, but the owner is great. And I think he's involved with other stuff. I think he's involved with other stuff. And that was you. And I remember pulling up to your office, and I was expecting to pull up to a light industrial garage. I thought of commercial kitchen repair. I'm thinking, all right, there's going to be like trucks and parts and stuff everywhere. It's going to be dirty. I'm probably overdressed. Maybe I should leave the sport coat in the car. And I pulled up to what I remember was sort of like a townhome, like the sort of what I would think of as almost like law offices. Walked in, and you had like this nice office with, your name on a sort of like a steel metal, plaque, and super nice office. And I remember you telling me like, tell me the Blue Corona story. And here I am thinking you own this. I remember even maybe saying like, I don't get it. Like, how's this a commercial kitchen? And you opened up this drawer in your office and said, these are all the companies that I'm involved with. And I don't remember how many it was at the time. So you were like, you're working with like one of them. And I remember thinking like, how do we not know this? Like, we have Salesforce as a CRM, we're a marketing company, we're a data company. Like, how do we not know that this company Sean just signed up is this, holding company with 30 or whatever it was at the time, companies? Like, why wouldn't that be the first on my list as a new customer, as opposed to like, oh, you could stop by and see this guy. So and unfortunately you gave us those words, kind of the 80-20, and we applied that to our customer base and our services and all that kind of stuff. I would say it probably took bringing in, when I hired a guy named Mike Wilson. Mike came in 2018, and he came from Infor, like big Oracle type company. And Mike's initial assessment, even as our VP of sales and marketing, was, we're trying to do too many things for too many different people. And so everything's just diluted. And so, and then I guess I was wise enough to, pull him aside and say, okay, like, let's talk through that. Like, I'm open to change. But so it took an embarrassingly long amount of time for us to.
But I mean, taking your own example, if on your trip to the Midwest, you probably spent a lot of time, a lot of customers. If you had spent a lot of time with us, there were lots and lots and lots of business there, but we dilute our time. We treat all customers as the same. As a matter of fact, we often disproportionately spend our time on the D customer because sometimes they don't pay their bills, they're competitive, or they're more demanding. And so, ironically, we tend to have an inverse relationship. Rather than spending 80% of our time on the 20% of the customers that are the most important, we tend to do it just the opposite. And that's just the way things take us. So what's interesting about it, whether it's with employees or customers, if you paint a picture of what your 80 is, to use that phrase, you also create a path for an employee that wants to do better, and they can try to migrate up that and try to become that with you, because you've painted a caricature of what you're trying to do. The same thing could be true of a customer. If you have a salesperson who really wants to try to convert that D to an A, at least you've painted a picture of what that path looks like, what the destination looks like. But I can't emphasize enough in terms of our success is distilling down, winnowing down, simplifying, clarifying, organizing around those customers that are already tremendous customers, giving them the service they deserve and then some, so that not only do you not lose them, but you actually enrich the relationship and expand the relationship in a way that's just very, very, and they become raving fans, and they need to be, because you can't afford to put them at risk.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. It's amazing how many things, whether it's success in business or personal, come down to these things, which are, I guess they're ultimately very simple, but that doesn't mean they're easy to adopt.
It's an important distinction. It's simple to understand, hard to do.
Yeah. Well, I guess talk about, what are you up to these days? What are you focused on? What do you do outside of work, passion projects, or things that are important to you?
I spend a lot of my time in a couple of areas. I'm about 6 or 7 boards, so I've really taken that seriously. 3 from the legacy companies that I've been involved with, because as much as they've grown, I have tremendous belief in them, and I believe with my time and belief with my money. So I want to make sure that they continue to do what they need to do, and I'm thrilled and privileged to, even though we have other cast of characters and really strong private equity partnerships, I feel honored and privileged to be involved with them still as they hit these next levels, next inflection points. I've also worked with some other private equity companies on portfolio companies they have from a board role. And one of the more, I guess 2 of the more interesting things I'm doing now is I'm kind of going back to my roots in a way, where I'm investing in businesses, people that have gotten some idea off the ground and have a lot of passion and hard work and have demonstrated success in a business idea. And then I can come alongside with capital and strategy and ideas at that lower level business in a way that my other mentors and partners, Steve and Joe and Jack and all these great people I've had the honor of working with have done for me. And so that I really, really enjoy, because it's not operational per se, but I have 30 some odd years of operational experience, which I can bring to bear for someone who's in their 3 to 5 year range and are looking to try to solve problems that every early entrepreneur deals with. So are there
industries that you're particularly interested in, or is it, how do you identify, companies that you're looking at, and to the extent that you're looking as opposed to them coming to you?
I'm doing a lot with Amazon businesses, Amazon FBA businesses, because they've gotten businesses off the ground, and there's a simplicity to what they're doing. So there's a lot of tools one can bring to bear in making those better. But I would say it'd have to be a business I understand and get and can bring a skill set to. I'm not great at biotech. I'm not great at B2C, the
consumer
apps and social media and so on. So I kind of know where I can play and where my tools and experience apply. I want to play in there. And then the other thing I did is started a film production company where we invest in films where, people who are starting out and, have a vision and a voice, but need capital and need experience. You'd be surprised at how different it is from my regular business and how similar it is. I don't pretend to speak into the creative voice of a young filmmaker, but I can speak into the legal side of it and the business side of it and that portion of the business. So,
and are there any genres of films that you're particularly drawn to, or is it just literally case by case? Just depends on like what piques your interest?
It's case by case, and I would say films where someone has something important to say and a need for capital. There's lots of, I'm not going to be investing in the next Marvel film because they've got plenty of suitors, but a young filmmaker who has an idea and a passion and a voice and needs someone to give them that break where they can get their story out there and a story I believe in. That's sort of the common denominator for my wife and I who are running this. It's just giving someone their break, giving someone their chance.
My final question, I keep staring at that bookshelf behind you, and I can make out just by the color, maybe one of the books on the shelf, but what are you reading these days? What are you listening to? What inspires you?
Yeah, I just picked up, actually, this is the book I'm currently reading. Ray
Oh,
Dalio.
nice.
He's,
Yeah.
he's sort of a great thinker and a big picture thinker, which I quite like. So that's what I'm reading today. In terms of podcasts, what I'm just crazy about is the All In podcast with for venture capitalists that take on issues. You know, what I really like is there are those that are on the left and they're on the right. They're all incredibly successful. They're all incredibly bright, but they really take on topics, you know, day-to-day topics as well as investing topics, which I just like, but they do it not from a political perspective or trying to defend it. They just really debate and discuss the issues, and they look for common ground. I just think in today's atmosphere, that's very pleasant to hear people really grinding on issues, but from a data point of view and from a fact point of view, not a biased point of view. So
thank you for sharing all of those things. I think, the folks listening, people trying to build their businesses and getting to these different stages where, it's sometimes you're like trapped in the echo chamber of your own business. And so just hearing someone who's done it sort of talk through those stories, I think is super valuable. I know it's valuable for me, and I know it will be for our listeners.
We're all in this journey together where, I've benefited from people that shared their stories and shared them honestly, and it's helped me, and I'm still on the journey. I still have more wood to chop and things I want to do, and I still reach out to people and listen to things like All In and read Ray Dalio, because I'm wondering what the next step looks like and how to forge that path. So happy to be a part of that and happy to give back in any way I can.